Hello everyone and welcome along to Clara in Conversation with me, Claire Ford, on RNIB Connect Radio. My first interviewee on the podcast that I will be speaking to today is Palma Allan MBE. Palma is very well known for her work with choirs, for children, young people and adults, and for her work as a deputy head and a music teacher, working in various schools in her local area of Inverclyde. In 2010, her selfless work was recognised as she was awarded an MBE by the Queen, and she has just completed yet another successful year with both her choirs, the Inverclyde School's Senior Choir and Inverclyde Voices, performing as guests of the Glasgow Phoenix Choir at the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow, with the Inverclyde School's Senior Choir at the annual Christmas concert in Greenock Town Hall, and with both choirs as guests of Inverclyde Voices themselves at their annual Christmas concert, which they hosted at St Mary's Church in Greenock back in December. It's a very warm welcome and hello to you, Palma. How are you today?
I'm very well, Claire. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for agreeing to be my first interviewee on my podcast. The piece that we heard at the beginning of the interview, Palma, was a piece called Somewhere Only We Know by Keane, and it was performed by the Inverclyde Senior Choir themselves. Many people would think and assume, Palma, that choirs sing mostly versions of classical pieces, but what they might not realise is that contemporary music, including pop music, can be sung as well. Do you think that this is a way of getting more people to join choirs? Or do you think that people join choirs nowadays simply for the love of making music?
That's actually quite a good question, Claire, because when we started at first, way back over 20 years ago, it was very classically based. And of course, I started with very young children. So you have to keep the interest up, so that they come along. And you know yourself, having been part of these choirs, that although you sing classical music, it's important to keep the current repertoire going as well, and there are some wonderful choir arrangements for them. So yes, I would say it's really part and parcel of what we do. It's not just about coming together to sing, but it's about using music from lots of different generations, easy listening music, pop music and classical repertoire, and these are all really, really important.
It's interesting. My mum and dad say that my love of music started from before I was born. In fact, when I was in the womb, when my mum had the radio on one day when she was in a bath, and Bon Jovi's Keep the Faith came on, and all of a sudden, within a couple of seconds, I started kicking lumps out of her in time to the music. When did your love of music begin, Palma?
Well, like you, at a very, very early age, I remember probably when I was just about school age, at 4 or 5 years of age, my dad playing records with music like the William Tell Overture on it, and I used to charge round the living room pretending I was on a horse conducting the music, and we had great fun. He was very musical. My dad loves opera, so that was always playing, and both mum and dad loved lots of different kinds of music, so we always had, Frank Sinatra playing, or some of the kind of older generation music. So I grew up memorising quite a lot of it, and then started sort of singing. They sent me for solo singing lessons when I was 7, so I really did start at a very, very young age.
And do you feel that your love of music was encouraged and allowed to blossom in school?
Very much so. Again, right from the early days in primary school, I was involved in all the choirs. In fact, I don't know how this came about, but I was chosen to conduct the percussion band in primary school in the Inverclyde Festival year after year after year. We won the trophy, and I've got lots of horrible pictures of me with very short hair conducting the percussion band when I was in primary school, and that I think just helped my love of music, but particularly being in the choirs. I was very lucky with the music teachers that I had in both primary and secondary. Absolutely loved being part of that music community, and going round hospitals and old folks' homes at Christmas time and at various times in the year, seeing the pleasure that it brings, to bring music to everybody.
And when was it you decided to turn your passion for music into a career?
Again, I did my higher music, and then I did, in those days it was 6th year studies music, and I remember saying to my music teacher after that, take my books back and never want to see music again, because I had worked so hard and spent so many hours practising. And he said to me, his exact words were, I'll give it 6 weeks and you'll be back. Mm-hmm. And he was absolutely right, because I came back to him at that point and said, okay, you're right, I need to keep this going. Let's think about what I can do and where I can go, because in those days we didn't have the UCAS system, so you just had to think about, you know, which university you wanted to go to, etc. And that was really how my career took off.
And you went on to study music and education at the Notre Dame College of Education and Glasgow University. One of your lecturers was the renowned choir conductor Marlon J. Smith MBE. Now, Marlon, for anybody who doesn't know her, is quite well known for being a very hard taskmaster. What was it like learning your trade from Marlon?
You're absolutely right. She is a very hard taskmaster, but she is the most caring and wonderful lady. When I started lessons with her, I was, you know, there was a bit of fear and trepidation. She never let you away with anything. But, you know, that didn't do me any harm, because it meant I was up very early. My singing lesson with her was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I had to get up at 6 to warm up and prepare for it, and go in, because I knew if I hadn't done it properly, I was going to get a rollicking from her. So, you know, it didn't do me any harm. It actually taught me a lot about the discipline that you need as a musician, both choral and instrumental.
And you were granted a licentiate from the Trinity College of Music in London. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, again, when I started at Notre Dame College, one of the things that they ask you to do is to do grade 8 singing, and I did that in first year, and did very well in my grade 8 singing. And so the next step up is the diploma. Which I, again, you know, worked for. There's a lot of work involved in it. I was kind of through the mill because I had glandular fever. And then I had my 4 wisdom teeth extracted the month before my performance. And then Marlon took very ill as well. So we had a year that was kind of peppered with either illnesses or conditions that stopped me rehearsing as much as I would have liked. But it was all worthwhile in the end, because, you know, just through the perseverance and through her patience, you know, we got to the point where I was able to go and complete the diploma, which is in teaching singing, and that gave me a huge amount of pleasure. And, you know, I know she was very, very proud, because I think I was probably one of her first students who had managed to do that.
What is it about Inverclyde that produces such a great tradition of great choirs?
It always has had. Inverclyde's an area by the Clyde, and you know, lots of industry going on in years gone by, and a great area for singing. You know, we had the male voice choir, the ladies choir, the Philharmonic choir, and at the time when Strathclyde region disaggregated and Inverclyde became a local authority in its own right, some of these choirs, the membership wasn't very high, and so they folded. And just at that time, I'd become head of department in Notre Dame High School, and my colleague Chick Keenan was also there. So we got together and decided that we would try and set something up for the young people in Inverclyde. There was very, very little in the way of music and performing arts for them in those days. I mean, we're going back to 1997, 1998. And so Chick set up the band, and we set up a strings group as well, bringing a conductor in from outside, and I set up a primary schools choir and decided we would start right at the bottom end, and it was amazing the amount of children who came forward and the amount of talent that's there. And you know, if we fast forward to today, we've now got a very vibrant, thriving you know, performing arts group in Inverclyde. So many different groups, theatrical groups, choirs, music groups, vocal groups and schools that are absolutely bursting at the seams with great new facilities, and all these children who are so multi-talented. It's just a wonderful area, to live and work in.
And can you tell us a wee bit about how the children and young people's choirs were formed back in 1999?
Yep. Well, what we did was we decided to audition. So we basically contacted all the primary schools and we asked for any children who were from primary 5 up to come along. We had over 200 children turn up, auditioned them all, and most of them, we ended up, I think, with about 120 in the first year out of the 200 who came along on a weekly basis. Started singing very, very simple songs, singing in unison. They arrived every week regardless of the weather, and it just grew from there. We then, a couple of years later, started to do festivals and competitions, and every year we auditioned and we brought in the new primary 5s who wanted to come and join us, and those numbers have held up. I mean, we've had almost 100 in the junior choir for the last 20 odd years, 21 years I think. The seniors, as the juniors came out of primary school and went into secondary school, we had to then set up a senior choir. There wasn't enough funding for us to do that on a weekly basis, but what we did was we had 2 weekends each year, where we took them to either Castle Towers or another venue, and we timed it so that it was just before our big concert in December and our other big gala concert in March. And so what we did was we got the ones who were now secondary school age, plus any other secondary school children that wanted to join, and we put together a programme of music each year for these 2 concerts. After 2 years of that, we were then able to have our weekly rehearsals, which was wonderful. And the junior choir got so big that we had to split it into a training choir and a junior choir, and there was nearly 100 in each of those. So it really did take off big style, and it's a wonderful legacy for Inverclyde now, because it's been going for so long and is still going strongly after all these years.
It's an incredible thing. And from there, of course, the Inverclyde Voices Adult Choir was formed. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, again, that came sort of through the years. We started that in 2005. So as the children who were in the junior choir moved to the senior choir, when they got to the end of their secondary school career, I started to get questions like, well, what are we going to do now? And how can we continue singing? Can you keep a choir going for us, or can we keep coming to the senior choir, or can we start a new choir? And so I listened to what they said and said, well, we could try and set something up, but there's not enough of you leaving, so we would need to open it up to family, friends, parents, etc. So I thought I'll try it. So on the 12th of September 2005, in the old Green Academy building, we basically spread the word and had our first rehearsal, and we had 72 people turn up. And over the next 4 weeks, that grew to over 100. Lots of family members, friends who came along, and people who just wanted to come and join. So Inverclyde Voices has been going for 15 years now. We've still got over 100 members who meet each week. The age range goes from 18 right through to, some octogenarians that are in the choir, and have been in it for the last 15 years. So it's a wonderful way of moving our choral development programme forward. So children all the way through from primary 5 right through secondary school and then into Inverclyde Voices, the opportunities are there if they wish to continue to sing.
Certainly is a great opportunity for people. And on that subject, we have a very special patron, Ali Jones MBE. You've taken your choirs to many prestigious venues over the years, none much so than the inaugural Choir of the Year competition, which airs every year on BBC Radio 3. How was it you approached Ali to become our patron? Did you clock him at a rehearsal, or did you just speak to him at a competition?
It certainly wasn't me. I can't take responsibility for that. In Inverclyde Voices, we have a committee. Well, we've always had a committee, set up with a constitution, and we spoke for a long time about having a patron, and because Ali Jones had been so enthusiastic about Inverclyde and about the Inverclyde choirs, particularly at the Millennium Centre in Cardiff, where both of the senior and junior choirs got through to the final of Choir of the Year, we felt that he would be a good person to approach, and so our business manager at the time contacted his agent and asked him if he would be prepared to be our patron, and the answer came back affirmative, and we've been in touch with his agent ever since. I actually had the opportunity to meet with him the last time he was up singing in Paisley Abbey. We were granted permission to go up and sit and chat with him, so he's very, very supportive. We've certainly put Inverclyde onto the map as far as choral singing is concerned, and he's very supportive of everything that we do.
That's fantastic. And as I mentioned there, you have taken your choirs to all four corners of the world, really. Some of the venues include the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow, the Usher Hall in Edinburgh, Corpus Christi Church in Dublin, Belfast, Austria, among others. But do you ever still get a degree of nerves before walking out in front of an audience?
Always. And I think, you'll find, speaking to anyone who performs, if you don't have that adrenaline rush before you go on, then, perhaps you're not in the zone. It's always good to have. I'm not nervous, about the choirs, about the work that they're producing or the programme that they're singing, but there's always just a little bit of nerves because there's a huge responsibility in standing in front of a choir who have no music, and you're the person who basically has to guide them through the music that's in front of you, bring them in at all the various parts, and have all the dynamics and all the words and everything really at your fingertips. That's quite a big responsibility, particularly if it's for a competition or a TV appearance or whatever. So yes, I do still get nervous, but it's a real buzz, and you come away from it at the end of it on such a high, and I know that my singers feel that way as well. So it's well worth the nerves.
Definitely. And you've had a career spanning near enough 40 years in the business, but what would you say stands as your proudest musical achievement?
Oh, that's a hard one. There's so many of them. I mean, it has to be some of the performances with the choirs. I think if I was to choose one, it would be the World Choir Games in Austria, where the junior choir won a silver medal and were ranked in the top 25 children's choirs in the world. At that point, that was totally unexpected, but that whole experience of being at what was the Choir Olympics and then became the World Choir Games, and hearing choirs really from the four corners of the world, Japan, the Philippines, South America, Canada, Australia, the musicality, the repertoire was absolutely out of this world. The South African choirs absolutely blew me away, and there was lots of categories. We were only in the children's category, but I think that probably stands out for me as the most life-affirming experience. It sort of brought everything into perspective, and it was such a wonderful experience for the children that we took out there. I don't think we would ever forget that trip. It really was the pinnacle of everything that I've worked for.
Brilliant. And as you mentioned at the beginning, you received an MBE in 2010 in the Queen's New Year's Honours List. Can you tell us how that came about?
I wish I could, Claire, but I don't know. These things are, kept very much under the radar. There are obviously people who nominate, and then I know it goes to a committee, and they've got to approve it. The first that I knew about it was when I received the letter in November, and basically 2009, which came in to say that I had been nominated, and would I accept it, and if I was going to accept it, I had to keep it absolutely secret until the 31st of December. And I was totally blown away by it. I have no idea, who the people who nominated me were. It's a very humbling thing to happen when that actually comes through, because I always think that the children and the young people that I work with are the people that do all the hard work. They're the ones that stand there and produce, the sound. And really I accepted it on behalf of all of these people that I've worked with, because without them I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
It is an incredible thing. And how did it feel just getting recognised for your life's work?
It was a real honour, as I say, very, 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 very humbling that should happen, and a very, very lovely occasion to go down to Buckingham Palace and to be honoured in that way. It hasn't changed me at all. In fact, I don't use the MBE very much at all, because I still do what I do in everyday life, and I know that lots of people that are nominated, that is their life's work, and that's what they continue to do. It's nice to be recognised, and I really was very appreciative of it. But the work still goes on. You still have to go to your rehearsals. You still have to, pull all the music together, get the choirs ready for performances, etc. So yes, it was lovely, and I'm very, very proud of it. But it hasn't made a huge difference to who I am or what I stand for or what I try to do with my choirs.
That's fantastic. And there's no doubt that your choir concerts that you put on are very popular. Certainly Christmas time would not be the same for the people of Inverclyde without the Inverclyde choirs performing for the people of their local area versions of their favourite Christmas songs and carols. What is it, do you think, about choral singing that remains so popular to this day and has the ability to lift people's spirits the way it does?
Oh, there's no doubt that choral singing does that, because it brings people together. If you think about any song where you're singing it together, every single person in the choir, whether there's 10 people or whether there's 110 people, are all focused on exactly the same thing, the same bit, the same words, the harmony that comes with it. And there's no doubt in my mind that just that unity of spirit and voice has the ability to change so much. Music, since the beginning of time, has been used for celebration, for feasts, for carnivals, but it's also used, at times of mourning, times of death, and some of the sadder times in life. So there is a real emotion in what you do, and no matter what kind of repertoire you do, if you tap into that emotion, it has the power. Music has the power, and choral singing has the power to change lives. There's no doubt about that. Even to the point of the memories that people hold dear to them. Christmas is a particular time of year where memories are so important to people, whether their families are, living away or whether they've been lost through death. It's a wonderful time to come together and feel that unanimity of spirit with everyone, and I really do believe that choral singing is one of the few places where that happens, because of the words of the text as well, because that's what makes it different from orchestral music. You've actually got words that you're communicating to your audiences as well.
Your choirs always have and always will be very inclusive, and welcome people from different backgrounds, traditions, and people with disabilities. Is this as a result of your natural egalitarian spirit, or do you consciously encourage diversity and ensure that people with disabilities are represented?
I don't consider it to be any different from anything else. I think in all walks of life, there are people, as you say, from all different backgrounds that come forward. For me, music and singing in particular is for everybody. Quite often, people will come and say to me, "Oh, I would love to join your choir, but I'm tone deaf, so I wasn't in the choir at school." That for me is a red rag, because I don't believe that for a minute. I believe everyone can sing, no matter what your disability is, no matter what your background is. There are ways of joining in and making music accessible for all. And I've spent my whole teaching career, not just for music, but as a deputy head as well, making education accessible to everybody and giving everybody, the means that they need to do that. You, of course, are a prime example of that, having come through from the training choir into the junior choir and the senior choir, etc. So, that's what it's all about to me. I don't go out actively seeking people with disabilities, but everybody is welcome, because music and choirs in particular are such inclusive places to be, and the possibility of making new friends, making lifelong friends is so important to everybody, not just to people who have got disabilities, but to everybody.
And as you know, I sing soprano in the choir. And I worked my way up from training choir to junior choir to senior choir, and then graduated from senior choir after I lost my sight at 18. It didn't stop me from doing that and then moving on to Inverclyde Voices. But how is it you conduct someone who is blind or partially sighted?
I don't think of myself as conducting individual people. A choir, is a place where everyone is together and work as a team. So, to use the example of yourself in the soprano section, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, hearing is so much more important when you're a musician. That not being able to read the music is one thing, but because we try to perform without music, those people round about you are the ones really that hold you up. And so through your hearing, you're able to balance your volume, your breathing, your phrasing, your dynamic range, everything, by listening to the people round about you. So, being partially sighted isn't and shouldn't be a problem. And whilst you cannot see me directly, those round about you can, and therefore that's part of what being in a group is all about in a choir, because you all work together.
I've met many people throughout my journey living with sight loss. Many of them have wonderful voices, but how is it we get the word out to blind and partially sighted people to not let their disability get them down and to join a choir?
There are so many ways, for people to learn music. There are actually choirs who never use music. They never use printed music. So there's lots of options out there, and I would encourage you, to find where they are and go along. If you are in a choir like Inverclyde Voices, where music is given out, there are ways of learning the parts. They can be recorded for you, they can be put online, they can be put into podcasts for you, and even sitting at rehearsals, you pick it out very, very quickly. If you think about the way that we teach young children who can't read or can't write, we teach them by rote. And that is a wonderful way. When I started the junior choir back in 1997, 98, we didn't use music at all. They were taught simply by repeating the music over and over again until they knew it. So please don't let that put you off. If you love singing and you want to be part of a choir, please go out there and find a choir in your area and go along. Everyone will be so friendly, and there are so many different ways of getting the music to you so that it is accessible and you are able to perform it with everybody else. In some cases, you will actually be the envy of everyone in the section because you are not using music and they're all taking their sheet music away to learn it. You will not have to do that, because again, your skills will be such that your hearing will be second to none, and you will pick things up so quickly. So I would really encourage you, do not let it stand in your way. Music has the power to change your life, so go out there and find a choir if that's really what you want to do.
So the music industry has produced so many great singers, many of whom are blind or partially sighted, including Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Andrea Bocelli. As an educator, do you think enough has been done to encourage people who are blind or partially sighted to pursue a career in music?
I don't think so, because we obviously don't have a lot of people. Certainly in the 20 odd years that I've been working, I have only come across a few. So what I would say is, although I don't know, I would guess that there's not enough being done at all. And I think, you know, in these days of inclusive education, it's really important to promote at every opportunity what is available for young people who are visually impaired or partially sighted. Not necessarily just singing, but learning to play musical instruments and, becoming part of bands and groups, folk bands, pop bands, etc. And I would say to schools out there to do everything that they can to encourage and include partially sighted and visually impaired young people, so that they can experience and enjoy what music holds for them. And until you experience it, you don't really understand it. So, again, speak to people who have used it as a tool, to get through life and to overcome the obstacles in life, and make people think about it, make people provide more for you. It really is a wonderful way forward for you, and I would say to you, without hesitation, to go ahead and push as much as you can.
And have you had any dealings with anybody, say in your family or at university, with people with sight loss?
I had, in my teaching career, I had one girl who had, she was visually impaired, but she was an instrumentalist as well as a singer, and had to learn all the printed music to perform it at her exam, and that took a lot. It took a lot for her to do that. But I was amazed at the strength that she had, and I was amazed at how dedicated and committed that she was, to make this happen. And she ended up getting a top grade, a top mark for the work that she did. So I know from personal experience, that it can happen and that it can be done. And of course from yourself, Claire, because having watched you come right through the choir programme, from training choir right through to Inverclyde Voices, I know how hard you work and I know what you get out of it. So yes, I mean, there are people out there who will be able to back up what I'm saying and what you're saying, and hopefully, will be able to help in some way and give advice if necessary.
And as I mentioned before, you're now retired, Palma. What does the future hold for you?
Well, retired's a funny word, Claire, because I'm busier now than I ever was when I was teaching. I think being a musician, your life is always going to have lots of different things in it. At the moment, I am working with children, doing individual one-to-one singing lessons, voice lessons with them, as well as continuing with my choirs. At some point in the future, I will look a little bit further afield and, maybe think about examining for the Associated Board or some of the Trinity exams that are on, possibly even looking at, becoming an adjudicator. These are all things that I would do at a later stage. What I'm doing just now, coupled with working for the Scottish Qualifications Authority as well, I'm still examining for that. Keeps me very, very busy. I have to say, not a day goes by where I sit on the couch and watch the television. So long may that continue, because if I can keep bringing music to people and encouraging young people to really enjoy music and promote performing to them all as a hobby or a career, then I'm doing my job, and that gives me so much satisfaction.
And that's great, and long may it continue as well. Well, Palma, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview today. I hope it's been very informative to all the listeners out there. And thank you very much for being on Clara Bell in Conversation.
Thanks very much, Claire. I've really enjoyed being here. All the best.
Thank you.